if you want. Perfect. Okay, thanks very much then. All right, so let's start with Jim Augustine because he's got to get off. He's in the middle of some stuff, but the main thing is like it's a little bit of things are more the same than they ever had been, right, Jim? And if you could talk a little bit about the drug shortage problems and how it's getting worse and where our more concerning areas are.
Yep. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, everybody. It's good to be on reporting. We have had drug shortage issues in emergency care since 2011, if you all can believe that. And they are based on American manufacturing, and because of the FDA requirements that final product manufacturing of drugs occur in the United States, it is American manufacturers that have to get primary materials, many of them from China and India, into this country and then do the final production. That includes our IV fluids. Since 2011, we've struggled and we've been on kind of a sinusoidal curve with the number of drugs that are in shortage and which ones are in shortage. This year, we actually, this past 12 months, we have really been running between 80 and 100 of our medication preparations that have been in shortage. As of the last couple of months, and I report this out and share the reports monthly with you, we're down to about 30 substances that are short. And that is as low as we have been since August of 2021. That does not include IV fluids, which, because of the destruction of the Baxter plant in North Carolina due to a hurricane in September, we have been short on a number of IV fluids. But because of great work by the federal government, Baxter, and the state, that plant is up and running, doing critical IV supplies. Not all of the 73 product lines that were produced there are back online, but their big volume, which is saline, lactated ringers, and all of the bigger bags, all come out of that plant. And for the most part, they're back in production. There are still not stores of that that have been resupplied. So there are spot shortages across the country where a winter supply chain occasionally will break down. But in general, I think all of you are back in situations where you have IV fluids. The other medicines that are made at other plants by other manufacturers across the country, the key shortages now are lidocaine, amiodarone, still Epi 1 to 10,000, but they have another version of that that is available. And some of our preparations of ketamine have not been readily available. So, Paul, we are at a good situation. I hope it continues to improve. We have been this good before, and 4 months later, we were back at very severe shortages. So, what I would say to your logistics people is take advantage of the opportunity to resupply the medicines that you need. And then one critical medicine is cyanokits. So the hydroxycobalamin has not been available. Many of you have been using or keeping in stock expired products. And as of about late March or April, we're supposed to have hydroxycobalamin, and they're going to be filling back orders for that. And so we will have some of that product available to come to us. So, Paul, that's where we have been. That's where we are now. And we look for another probably 6 months before every one of our IV supplies will be back in. For those of you who have any experience with irrigating fluids in the ORs, those are still short. Thank you. Paul, I can't hear you if you were speaking.
I purposely muted myself. I apologize. So what I was going to say was, anybody have any further questions or anything to add to what Jim was just telling us? And from what I understand, you don't have anything new from the report on you as the medical director for the International Association of Fire Chiefs. You don't have anything to report on that end right now. There are things percolating, but nothing to report on right now, correct? Okay.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
gonna ask real quick, channeling Chris Colwell, droperidol, where are we at with that? Because I have a number of agencies that don't have droperidol. We've had to switch to Haldol.
Let me give you a quick report on that, and that is droperidol, the 2.5 milligram per 2 ml is not available. There's no substitute, and it's unknown when it will be back. So the smaller preps would be available. Thanks, Dave. Speaking on behalf of Chris.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions or whatever? Okay, if none, then let's move on. David Wittberg, you there? So are you up and connected with us? Okay.
I am indeed, yes.
Yeah. So, and hang on, David. I just wanted to preface this that I've been very. I think you know, David. I've been in touch with like Holly and also the chief, who's John Donnelly's a fantastic guy. We've known each other pretty well for quite a while, and they received orders that if uniformed officers couldn't speak to anybody else or outside sources about the crash at all. But I just wanted to bring up a generic presentation and also have you tell us what you can tell us or what you're allowed to at this point, David. And then I'll make some commentary about other events that, for example, I've been personally involved with in such relevant to this and sort of lessons learned. And I want to hopefully have you focus mostly on the taking care of the rescuers, because there wasn't a whole lot to do in terms of the patients. And I just want to know, because you probably had to take care of more of the rescuers, like the divers and people like that, than the patients from the planes or the aircraft, I should say. So with that opening, I just hope that fits with what you want to report to us. Okay, so thank you.
Absolutely. So
For those who don't know, David's our, because Rob Holman was on with us so long that that David, I think took over from Rob last year, and so is now our DC medical director in search of an assistant. I was saying I'll apply. Okay, so to work with you.
actually, you might be a minute late. We extended an offer to somebody, but so hopefully we'll have an assistant joining us shortly.
But I know that's keeping you busy. All right, go ahead then, David.
Yeah.
Thanks for the time, because I know you got to go. You've got after act reports and who else knows whatever you got going on. So, all right, so go ahead.
Sure, absolutely. I'll keep it brief. Everybody has seen the news. We know what happened Wednesday evening. My initial response as an EMS physician was to our unified command post at Joint Base Anacostia Bowling. That joint base, that unified command, has since moved to the DCA Terminal 1. We had set up a casualty collection point on the opposite side of the river near the Navy Yard riverfront, if people are familiar with that, underneath the Frederick Douglass Memorial Bridge. My role as an EMS physician, I initially responded to that unified command post, interacted with those that were kind of first on scene, providing incident command. And then as I was standing there and we were kind of, I think all of us as EMS physicians go to these things hoping to actually take care of patients. We received a report of patients being delivered to Captain's Cove, which is just due south on the same property as Joint Base Anacostia Bowling. And I had one of our EMS battalion chiefs move me over there, hoping that I could actually treat patients. And it brings up, one of the first lessons learned. And I made a quick list, and I'll just share that with the group in a minute. But as it wound up being one of the first people, one of the first victims pulled out of the water, and not a patient that I could help treat. I'm just going to, Paul, if it's okay with you, I kind of jotted down lessons learned in between some of the other meetings that I've been having. One of the first lessons learned, which I think a lot of us that have responded to MCIs can relate to, is terminology. The use of the words victim, patient, passenger, and how utterly confusing this was in the first few minutes to, frankly, first few hours of the incident. And the kind of preloaded notion that we were going to start treating people met with an actual casualty being delivered to the shore actually provided, I think, some level of distress that wasn't necessary, and that we'll certainly focus on in the future when we look for opportunities for improvement. So having unified terminology, encrypted communications was a big deal.
Let me interrupt you there. Okay, so what specifically is the proper terminology then that you're leading to here? Okay, if you could go back and talk about, if you arrived there, what terminology should they have been using?
Yeah, so I think the terminology victim or patient would entail, somebody that's potentially viable or potentially viable.
Yes,
Our operational bulletins use the word casualties to describe deceased persons.
okay. And that's what you're suggesting then at this point in time versus say passenger or whatever?
I defer to the group whether or not there's a universally agreed upon, nomenclature here, but I think that, we all look at our own policies and bulletins. And again, I think the first lesson learned is we have a lot of bulletins and policies that dictate how we respond to MCIs, but within that also having a section for terminology and universally agreed upon terminology.
Okay, good. That sounds great. And we can maybe even help with that and have a discussion on it. Like that'd be a great thing for Eagle Creek, for example, or another one of these meetings that we're doing here. Okay, good. Thanks. Sorry. Let's
Yeah, no
move on.
worries. I only have about 10 lessons learned so far, but the next thing I have on my list is,
That's all, huh? Just 10. Okay, good.
there's a lot, I'll limit it myself today in the interest of time, but a lot of us still respond to incidents, especially when they're large scale incidents. And I think every EMS physician responder on the call should take stock of what they carry in their personal vehicle or on their person. One of the crucial things that I was missing was a PFD. And all of this took place near the water's edge. And when I was called down to assess somebody or work near the water's edge, I was thankfully pushed back by some of our safety officers because I initially didn't have on a PFD. So, again, if you're an EMS physician field responder, take stock of what you have. And I highly recommend if you have any bodies of water in your district, consider putting a PFD in your vehicle. The next
one more thing to just make sure everybody knows you're talking about personal flotation device.
flotation device, right?
Yep. Okay.
And you can get the super compact ones that are nitrogen loaded, and you just pull the cord and kind of like you'd find, on any boat or airplane. The next issue really was interesting. Again, I went there with the intention of treating patients, and sadly wound up embedded with the Office of the Coroner Medical Examiner, processing casualties as they came up off the water onto a dock into where we set up our morgue tents. And what I appreciated very quickly was that, and I don't know if others on the call do this, we do not routinely involve our ME's office in MCI drills or even much in the way of MCI planning. And this really became an issue because the medical examiner's workflow became a bottleneck, a choke point, both on the intake of casualties and on the exit of casualties away from the site. So we set up these two huge tents that we were able to bring casualties into. They easily accommodated 20 bodies each. And given kind of the relatively slow cadence of removal of casualties from the water, we kind of put 10 in a tent at a time. The OCME in your city probably only has 1 or 2 people on at any given time. Even in the District of Columbia, with our penetrating trauma rate and all the work that they have to do, they have at most maybe 3 people on call at any time. And what we found was some of our ambulances and medic units were actually delivering casualties or even body parts to the morgue tent. And the 2 or 3 initial OCME staff that were on scene and their detectives and support teams were very quickly overwhelmed by the work that they had to do. And so we had a problem both getting ambulances cleared from the morgue tents to return to where they were needed to stage. And we also had a problem on the rate of processing decedents and then moving them out to the morgue vans to bring them to their more centralized location. And what happened in the end was our commanders at that casualty collection point helped the OCME create a much more smooth and efficient workflow. So I will finish by saying, just make sure that if you do MCI drills and when you write your bulletins, don't forget to include the ME's office or whoever will be helping you sort through and catalog your casualties, because they are going to be a integral part of any large scale disaster. The next thing I had on my list was documentation, our favorite topic. In just the first 24 to 48 hours after this event, there's been a lot of conversation about how to document our work from the EMS side. And I'm going to move away from my notes just to speak a little bit more freely. My first assessment was that we didn't actually provide any patient care. Every patient that was delivered to where I was on the dock with our members and the OCME all had injuries that were incompatible with life. And again, my suspicion is that the mechanism of injuries here were threefold. One, either the force of impact and sudden lack of movement of the fuselage and deceleration of the helicopter. Second was there was clearly a blast that went through the fuselage because a lot of the injuries that I saw on casualties were compatible with blast injuries. And then third was the downward, almost vertical descent from 250 to 300 plus feet. And I think any one of those three mechanisms of injury taken alone or in conjunction with each other were not survivable, which gave me solace in that I didn't see any patients that I could quickly ascertain, had drowned. That said, the issue came up in the first 24-hour period after the event about how we were documenting things, because inevitably there's going to be a request for medical records from a lot of people and a lot of agencies downstream. In the District of Columbia, my name is affixed to any pronouncement of death in the field. But the question came up that, while we were still recovering bodies during what was labeled a rescue, in reality, it was a recovery operation from very early on and continues right now to be a recovery operation. And who should be making the pronouncement of death? What paperwork, if any, should be filled out by EMS? My initial notion was that we create one PCR and then I fill it out for the incident and talk about the workflow that we used, which was that when the casualties were moved out of the water to the dock, the OCME alongside me photographed what we could of the person with a OCME casualty tag, and that we used the digital timestamp of the photograph as the time of death. This was actually met with a bit of resistance by our legal counsel, who was concerned about a one-size-fits-all medical record for the incident and the potential implications for HIPAA and different parties requesting the medical record. So in all of that, I'm not sure which direction we're going to go in, but figuring out what the expectations are for documentation, especially when something becomes apparently very quickly recognized as more of a recovery rather than a rescue, is important to work out ahead of time. And making sure to go over all those things, both with your internal folks and your legal counsel. The last thing I'll throw out there, or two last things, triage tags weren't utilized, although there were about 16 to 18 bodies that were discovered and pulled out of the water relatively quickly. I think there's a growing consensus regarding the futility, if you will, of kind of regular triage tags, and they weren't being used. There's the next thing on my list is, for those of us that work around military installations, there are special handling protocols for active military, and active military often desire to take care of their own, and that can often create conflict when you are kind of in a command position trying to help with things. And especially if you're where I was at a casualty collection point, please, if you work near military installations, and certainly if you have interagency operations with military groups, understand how they process casualties, because it's a bit different than the way we do it on the civilian side. I would also add that it's critically important. All of us that are EMS physicians should be well versed in the incident command system. The absolute crucial nature or need to stand up the planning section almost from the beginning of an incident, when you realize that it's going to be going on for more than 8 to 12 hours, and that planning section be seated somewhere quiet in front of computers with resources to develop the incident action plan for the event you're dealing with, and certainly for the second and third 24-hour period. Paul, you mentioned kind of treating our rescuers. What I found was I was actually moving a lot of very fatigued people away from the edge of the water and preventing them from falling in and drowning, more than I was actually helping divers who were, as we've all heard, covered in jet fuel. And so I would urge everybody to get a planning section up early, have an IAP developed early, and in that IAP, firmly identify who your relief crews are to come relieve the exhausted folks that have been on the front line for the first 12 hours or more. And the real last thing that I'll leave you with is that, again, a lot of this is very common sense, but have a medical director playbook. Think about everything that could go wrong in your jurisdiction or your agency. And I'll just give you one very specific example. I finally got to sleep around 5 a.m. the day after, and was woken up around 8 a.m. To a phone call from the people that were putting together our IAP, asking about hyperbaric capabilities around the crash site. And I had luckily trained at the University of Maryland in shock trauma and knew about their multi-place chamber and their capabilities. But I had a very vague idea about the capabilities in the district. There's a lot of monoplace chambers that operate Monday through Friday that do wound care, business hours only. And so it would have been a lot easier if I had had that in my playbook and that information right at my hip, rather than having to kind of rub my eyes, go down to my office, make some phone calls around the region, and ensure that I actually understood the capabilities of the proximal hyperbaric chambers to the incident. I have a lot more, but I'll leave it at that. I appreciate everybody's texts and emails. We've stood up a peer support team that's doing an incredible job, and I took advantage of meeting with that group yesterday. And I think that a lot of times, especially full-time EMS medical directors or EMS directors that are part of the executive leadership team or the command structure, we set up the peer support, but we don't necessarily partake in it. And I found it to be very, very helpful to kind of go home and have dinner with my family last night, to actually stop in and meet with them first. So Paul, thanks for giving me time today. I'll leave it at that.
No, it's great. And it's really a awful thing to have to go through. And but you're big on mnemonics, though, for the rest of us that may not know, what's an IAP?
Sure. So Incident Action Plan is a really, really nice guiding document that follows kind of the NIMS incident command structure and maps out an event. It gives you a sweeping overview of just simple background information. What is, for those that maybe just came off vacation and are coming in to relieve somebody in a command post or even a frontline position, what's actually happening? Where is it located? What's the background? What's the history? What's the geography? Then it goes through the command structure, outlines your ICS chain of command, which changes frequently every 12 to 24 hours, contact information for everybody. And for us EMS medical directors, a very robust IAP always includes a catalog of receiving medical facilities and capabilities. And that's really where we can contribute and make sure that that's accurate.
Yeah. So let me ask you a couple of quick questions. First of all, is how jurisdiction is a good way of putting it first. Okay. In other words, was this clearly in your jurisdiction? Okay. Where this was, and how does that, particularly you talk about National Airport, right? Which is of course across the river, but but do you guys have the whole river, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the river is geofenced. So we use geofencing for a lot of our special events, but also the waterways around DC are geofenced by jurisdiction, and that area of the Potomac was ours and our fireboats patrols jurisdiction. Our first arriving unit was actually an engine from the east side of the river on the Anacostia side. Got there in 9 minutes, but the fireboat was there shortly thereafter. There was an issue of jurisdictional nature in that, I never really perceived chaos, which was beautiful. I really perceived organized, rehearsed response, but there was a bit of quick plucking of victims, casualties out of the water that were delivered to the Arlington Reagan National Airport side. That actually became not so much an issue for resources, because Alexandria and Arlington, they all responded to that side near the airport. And of course, the airport authority responded. It actually became an issue with regard to processing the bodies. And the OCME for DC wanted to handle the entire incident. But there was discussion that ensued because of casualties being delivered to the Virginia side.
Classic. So just out of curiosity, and I'll explain why I'm asking this, is the water where you were working, I know it was only like what, 8 or 10 feet or whatever it is. It seems like, it was deep there, but it was not so deep in that area we're working. Is that brackish water? Is it sea salt water or fresh water?
So it is, it's brackish water. The Potomac, if you follow it due north from Reagan National Airport, splits three ways. It splits leftward, northwest towards Harper's Ferry, Western Virginia, and continues as a Potomac. If you go straight up, it turns into the Washington Channel, which ends at the tidal basin near the National Mall. And if you continue upward to the right towards the northeast, it turns into the Anacostia River. So you have a lot of fresh water coming down. I don't think it's a true estuary.
Yes.
It's dark, muddy, brackish water. It's very shallow. But
Well-
the other thing that came into just again, as far as incident planning, is tidal movement. And the casualty collection point up by Navy Yard was actually set up initially against the direction of tidal flow. And that, coupled with moving through ice, made it difficult when bodies were recovered for the vessels to navigate north to that casualty collection point.
Yeah. So, and one of the reasons I'm asking, but it's not so, let's say, pertinent to the DC area, but could be, is that especially if you have salt water in a form, and particularly people are around the, let's say, the ragged edges of the remnants of the aircraft, etc., they get cut up, and then they have maybe different forms of bugs that they may get exposed to, and we may think it's strep or staph, and it may be something more aggressive and worrisome. So just what's the word I'm looking for? Just that has application to other people who may have to experience these things and talk about it. So I was one of the things that I found, the reason why I was asking about the workers, is that years ago, 1993, I was doing an evaluation for Mayor Dinkins of the EMS system, and I just happened to be asked to come out with the crews again that I've been with all weekend to there was a snowstorm coming in. They wanted to know if I wanted to go out with them. So I did, and we did have a plane crash in LaGuardia. It was an interesting one because the wings, they had been de-iced, etc. But unfortunately, I guess it re-iced enough that they could never get off the ground. They slammed into a berm. The wings that are full of fuel, of course, had all the flames, and that's what you focus on, all these flames. But interestingly enough, like a pencil, the fuselage went over and it went into the drink. And we actually had a lot of people who were not necessarily, injured like you had in that situation, but they were actually drowning persons, and they didn't even recognize that until they started seeing some people coming up over the berm. But of interesting is that there were 26 dead, 26 survivors, similar aircraft, and maybe only 3 or 4 were critical, I would say. But the thing that was phenomenal was that I spent more time later taking care of the rescuers. That's why I brought that up. And I'm talking about acute injuries, especially the divers. And what you alluded to, I just wanted to, this is for everybody else's purpose, to further discuss what you're saying, is that, I was treating them for kerosene burns, some of the divers, getting into the eyes, okay, that kind of thing, or getting cut up as they were going through, trying to get into various tight corners, etc. And so it was an interesting thing. But the thing I'm most concerned about is that when they do see dead bodies that they couldn't help, the guilt thing comes in, and or whatever it is. And either way, the images stick with them for a long time. So it's one of those things I want everybody to consider as we go through this. Any other commentaries you could say about what I just learned, what I had learned? Anything else you would extend on that, or
just to go off your last point, one of the things that was stood up early in the event was they took a party cruise, a dinner cruise liner, and used it basically as a fixed platform in the middle of the channel to serve as a site that the divers and the crews operating on what we called our river command could get on and off of to get relief. That actually posed a challenge for getting medical personnel out there to provide rehab, to do some of the assessments that you just described. So, yes, so my biggest concern right now is, of course, getting entangled in the wiring of the fuselage and making sure that we have medical resources lined up for our divers. But because they are actually in the middle of the water and often not coming back to shore, one of the first things that I did today was reach out to our peer support team and make sure that we could get some of them on that free floating platform that they've set up. Because, I know what it was like to just be there for a few hours on dry land. I can only imagine what they would.
Oh, lost them there for a second, I guess. Is everybody hearing me, or is that?
Yeah, he froze up.
froze. Okay, David, you froze up for a little bit. You were talking about the platform. Keep going.
Yeah, just I think the most important thing was actually getting medical, getting them rehab medical capabilities on that platform
Absolutely.
and off the shore.
Yeah, that's really important. And then what you guys also had to add to for other people who may have to experience this sometime was these were that I was really heavily involved. I've been in a few of these, but the one that I mentioned before, it was obviously it was snowing and it was frozen, and you got lots of hypothermia with the rescuers as well, and or pending hypothermia, et cetera. And you had the same issue, correct?
Yeah, I don't know if people followed the news, but a week or two before, we actually had a pickup truck go off the Memorial Bridge that connects kind of behind the Lincoln Memorial to Arlington National Cemetery, and it was snowing and it was much colder, and our divers were in the water there recovering two victims, and another good kind of plea to make sure that you have a hypothermia protocol, a submersion protocol, you understand hyperbaric capabilities, that if you have a dive team, that you actually have probably a separate set of protocols for how to do rehab for your divers. So they had rehearsed what they're doing right now, slightly different terrain, right? Vehicle versus plane, but much colder, brutal conditions under the ice a few weeks ago for that vehicle that went over. So it was actually a blessing that they actually had that call and that kind of dry run for this much larger scale event.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's, again, these are just beginning points, as you were alluding. But I just think for people who are going to face this sometime somewhere, they need to know about it. Just any anecdotes about, when the Air Florida crash happened in 1982, there on the nearby bridge, was it 14th Street or something like that? They did have survivors there in that situation. And it was, again, January weather, very cold, etc. Did anybody bring up anything from that to add to the conversation here?
Just I certainly wasn't there, but I've watched the videos. The capabilities back then were profoundly fewer than they are today.
Exactly.
It's been an enormous amount of planning and equipment and interagency training, and so I think obviously we're much more well prepared. The Eagle, our National Park Police helicopter, was kind of at the core of that rescue. As they were in this rescue, they were one of the aviation assets that was kind of overhead and searching the water. And
yeah, is Michelle Curry involved with that, with National Parks? And do you know her?
I don't.
Okay, got it. I'll get you guys plugged in together. Might be a good thing. All right, so I think that's enough for this in a sense, and a good start. It was like even better than I thought you'd be able to do for us today on such short notice. But it was a great reflections, and hopefully can put this together. In fact, maybe even write up a paper sometime so people will have this. I think you've heard already. If you look at the chat, you were too busy doing your presentation, but everybody is thanking you for incredible dedication, what you went through yourself, because you went through it too. You're a part of this, and it'll have some reflections, particularly since you had to be in the ME tent, right? It's awful. And but at the same time, thank you for being there, and thank you for making this, these efforts here, and your team, and best to all of you for what you went through, etc. And now I have the single most important question I have to ask you is, where are you right now? Can you tell us who the background is? Okay.
Yeah, so this is our beautiful Fire Operations Center. It is when I talked about standing up an IAP, this is terra firma. This is above one of our historical firehouses on 13th Street Northwest. And it is really the nerve control center for anything that happens in the district of moderate to bigger scale. And one of the things that I'm trying to do is blow it up. And we are called DC Fire and EMS. I'd like it to be the Fire and EMS Operations Center. And we're actually looking at—
What you see me in the EMS and fire, you mean, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm looking at using this more for actually day-to-day patient flight control and disposition and interfacility movement than it is just for kind of coordination of these big incidents.
John was fantastic, by the way, and they did make it clear it was DC Fire and EMS. It was very, very good that they did that, through all the media presentations of it. So, and so on. Well, anyways, anybody else want any, for your purposes, anybody ask any questions for him or want to make some commentaries on behalf of the group? Anybody else have anything to add here or want to add? please feel free to, or raise your hand or whatever it may be.
It's Mayor Montes. I was just gonna say, in your planning section, be ready in 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks for absenteeism and needing to get people off for care. You should plan on that and be ready for it because
Right.
you're gonna have folks that are gonna need some help. And then you are also gonna have people that are gonna leave the teams after this. And so
Yeah.
you need to start planning for and budgeting to get those folks trained up in their new role if they go to the boat or the dive team, whatever. But those are unanticipated expenses and issues that you're gonna have to plan for immediately.
One of the cool things about, before David talks, is that, and I was aware they were already operational, is that they have an incredible support team up there, I have to say, for DC Fire, and they're very fortunate to have that, and I think they're anticipating, but it's a good point to reinforce that for everybody else's purposes, David. I really appreciate it. And David Wittberg, anything else you would add to that?
No, I mean, we're actually, David Miramontes, we're actually, it's interesting. We just finished all these NSSE events through elections, inauguration. Our next big thing was, so we were exhausted from that, right?
Right.
And we unfortunately had a line of duty death and a funeral planned Monday. And so now pile on top of that, this crash, that was something that, I appreciate that feedback because I think it was something we were thinking about, but it's actually something we have to more concretely plan for.
And more importantly, at the police and fire clinic, make sure you have psychologists and psychiatry beef up your action. So remember, I had the Navy Yard, right? And I actually was the EMS chief for the Navy Yard, and that was an event, and just like this, because everybody was dead, right? And that was the big problem. But I'm glad you're progressing, and our hearts go out to all your crews. It's going to be a rough road, and just reach out to us. A lot of us has been there in these circumstances, but making sure that we take care of our own, prevent suicide and depression proactively is a full-time job now for your crews.
Agreed. Thank you.
Yeah. And before you go, Randy Schaefer, Dr. Schaefer, if you don't mind, just so we don't reinvent the wheel, can you tell us what you've and David already knows this, but for our group, tell us a little bit about how the Army has defined casualty and whatever, and patient and so on. Can you do that for us?
Yeah, and David, I'm sure you've learned this, that we do speak different languages in the military. So from a healthcare perspective, doctrinally, we look at a casualty as a patient who is not engaged with a medically trained provider. So think about a lot of your tactical combat casualty care is administered by non-medical personnel, right, out on the streets. Once that person comes in contact with the healthcare system, a medically trained provider, they become a patient. And
I
then
appreciate that feedback, and it's interesting though when you have a dual hazard or all hazard department where every one of your members is trained as a medical person, but they are really just engaged in, again, what quickly became recovery, and the lawyers and the executives trying to sort out, well, you had patient contact and you must have done an assessment to determine that they had injuries not compatible with life. So I understand the definitions. It's just the application is challenging.
Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. And not all military know this either as you're engaging with them. You have to really understand and go back. There is actually a whole manual on it. But thank you for all you did. My comment was I did see the dignified transfer of remains with the flag, and I can't tell you how much I appreciated that.
nice. Yeah, good. Peter, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, just a comment to David. Thank you so much for being there for your folks. I just want to reflect on the help that Paul and David gave me, David Miramontes, after Parkland. And I did want to make a comment that something that I didn't recognize at all that would happen that did, were all the people who weren't on shift or who weren't allowed to respond because they were covering the rest of the city. They got really screwed up because they wanted to be there.
Yeah.
And so I would pay attention to the people who weren't there just as much as I would the people who were. That would be my comment.
It's an amazing point, and I saw this also on the hospital end. I was bombarded with text messages and phone calls from our three primary receiving hospitals about, hey, when are we getting patients? Like, it's very reminiscent of 9/11, and when are we getting patients? And the deflated responses, when I said, you're not getting anybody, they had called in teams as well, and so there's such a huge ripple effect here.
So based on something we did at NMSP, which was a spontaneous thing that got started up by a couple of people, such as our medical director from Las Vegas, and then of course also Erica Carney and Meg. Right after the truck attack, we got together and talked about all this stuff here, and we're going to actually have a whole session, I think, in Eagle Creek, probably the morning of Eagle Creek day 2. We're probably going to have a whole session on this and talk about it. But one of the things that percolated up that was really clear cut is there's a common theme that people start feeling guilt. When there's a great tragedy, they could say, even if it's an individual, they go, I never kissed him goodbye this morning, or I told him to take his medicines, whatever. But in a tragedy like this, you'll have everything from the whole spectrum could be like, why didn't you call me? When you were referring to the hospital, I was wondering, why didn't know about this? Or Peter, what you experienced yourself, at the scene where you were held back because we didn't have the guy captured yet, and you guys wanted to come in and help people, but you couldn't. And then in this situation, the analogy is that they really couldn't help anybody, that kind of thing. So it's there's so many different ways it's expressed, and it comes out, and that's a common theme that we have to know. And then, but it's a good thing. Like, for example, when you were calling me from the hospital, that's a good thing because you cared. Did I do the right thing? That's what people are going to say. And to have people around that are senior, as David Miramontes are saying, to say, I'm glad you feel that way, but you did do great. In fact, I'm glad this happened because blah, blah, blah. So that's an important part of this that we could talk about. So I think I'm going to have a whole series about not only mass gatherings or some tragedies like this again, because that was actually considered, that thing we did a couple of years ago about Parkland was considered one of the best talks we'd ever had.
Yeah. And I love those comments, Paul, and I agree. But I'm very interested to hear from David over time, because there's an extra layer here of it's being politicized. And I wonder, depending on which side of the fence you sit on, that's just an extra layer of anger and anxiety, and I get pissed off. And so I don't think that's going to get any better. And I wonder if that's going to aggravate exponentially the emotion after this event.
So Peter, you read my mind. I'm looking at the quick notes that I prepared for this meeting. And again, I'll do this off the cuff and I'll look at my notes. But one of the things that I personally struggled with, and you probably did at Parkland as well, was I consider it such a blessing to have a front seat on history, right? No matter where it's made, but it's a very double-edged sword, right? Because of what the history that is being made. And we often, if we're in the front line supporting our troops, we know a lot more than even the highest levels of our political structure and our PIOs and spokespeople know. And one of the multiple emotions that I experienced immediately after and continue to experience is having been at the shore and knowing really granularly what happened and who was responsible. Has actually has pissed me off, right? And I'll give you one example, and it'll kind of be devoid of political commentary, but DC Fire and EMS responded. We had everything in place. We were basically running the incident for the first easily 6 to 12 hours with other representatives there, but the person from this agency or that other, and listening to the president's comments the following morning, when he extolled praise on the Coast Guard. So I think a lot of us would find a lot of his comments questionable. So I'll stay away from that. But when he started extolling praise upon the Coast Guard, and I was there, and I know that the Coast Guard had one little dinghy, one inflatable in water, but it was, we had so many other assets. I took it very personally that he didn't praise us. And then I realized, like, okay, move on. But I agree with what you said.
Go ahead, Paul.
I was saying that Peter and I have talked about this before, but I actually, one of the things that why the media suddenly come out, they are basically often immediately get into they have to find blame. That's the guilt thing. How did this happen on our watch? Someone had to be responsible for this. So that's another, let's say, manifestation of the guilt issue that, is a common theme. And I remember, Peter, remember you were feeling some anger that day, and what was my response to you? You just heard it very well articulated by David, right? Just that you gotta just, you have to just eat it, to some extent, summed up.
Well, yeah, and I think that one of your comments, which it holds true for David's situation here, is that at the end, the truth always comes out. So
Yeah.
if you follow the Parkland thing, people were there trying to take credit, and we're sitting in the back, and I'm biting my tongue, and I'm like, you weren't there. That's total bullshit. But then over time, all of it came out in the end, and the people who were taking credit looked really bad in the end. So that's a great lesson to learn, is that just let it come out and don't let it hurt, get to you. But I was very pissed off that day. Yeah.
And the other thing is, just remember, you're a public servant and people are just out there trying to whatever, that kind of thing. So,
Correct.
all right, enough of this for now, but this was like really incredibly even better than I expected, David. I hope that it wasn't a problem for you in terms of, I know that they were asking other people out to talk. I hope you were okay to talk about this. And I hope that people respect what you said, because this is a QA meeting as far as I'm concerned. And then I hope you are available that week of June 9th to be part of our sessions that we'll have, because I certainly will be plugging this in, in terms of this, let alone the blood issues that you guys are doing and all that, right? So how many cases are you up to on the blood end, by the way? You look in the back.
220.
We just had one just now, right?
220.
Go ahead. How many have you had?
220.
220, that's all. Okay, got it. And when did you start?
April 10th.
So it's not even been a year yet, so that's amazing. So, all righty, well, good. All right, anybody else have any final questions for me? Because I got to move on to other things and so on. I was looking around for some folks that were supposed to give talks for us here. While I'm doing that, David, why don't you, David Miramontes, why don't you plug in and tell us about the bizarre thing that's happening in Texas? And if you don't mind. And David, thanks a lot. Hey, David, if you're still there, would you, looks like we lost him. David Vidberg,
Yes.
if you're still there, would you give me a call, like a call either Saturday or Sunday, preferably, maybe tomorrow afternoon. How's that? That would be probably good. And it has to do with a separate issue. That's also okay. So
Yeah, I hope I'm not in trouble, but I'll call you.
oh, no. It's actually, you're going to be doing me a favor, for, let's say for a good cause. Let me put it that way. That's happening in the district. Okay. So, all right.
No
Okay. What the heck happened in Texas, right? Okay, David, bring it on. Okay. Hey, David, I can't hear you, but your image is up.
This is a word of warning to all our medical director friends. Stay tuned in to what's going on in your state. So I'm going to tell you a little story and what happened, and you're going to go, what the heck?
What the heck is right? All right, go ahead.
So this hit my email inbox, boom, from the state. It said, oh, Texas medical directors, by the way, we changed all the rules. And here they are. And we're all going, what? Where did this come from? The Texas Medical Board literally changed all the rules regarding delegation of practice. And, in Texas, that's a big deal for EMS. And we're like, who was involved in this? And we all looked at each other, no one. No EMS physician was involved in this change. And it's a word of caution for you that stuff can happen behind your back if you're not careful and you're not keeping your eye out. So what did happen? Well, we used to have this really great rule, and it outlined what an offline medical director was. It was 20 something points. It's great stuff. So it says like monitor compliance with your organization, develop protocols, do a system audit. You have to be the primary liaison with the medical community. All the things that a medical director does was outlined in all this rule. And it was great for us, like in Fort Worth and Dallas and Austin, Houston, because we could go to our folks and say, look, this is the stuff we got to do. These are the people I need to do it. And this is how much it's going to cost. So it was really clear. And we had educational requirements that said you either had to be board certified, first place ever where EMS board certification came in right after it happened in 2013. And all of that was all in place. And then this little thing called the Texas Register. So those of you who don't know what this, the Federal Register Your state has one too. The edition that this came out in was 138 pages. 138 pages. You have to wade through. And on page 36, the new rules were there. And there was a comment period. None of us knew. We had no idea this was happening. And so we said, well, how can you do that? How can you have a rule and not elicit public comment? Oh, we published it in the register. That's all we have to do. We have published the register. And if you don't have anything to say, we move forward. That's what the counsel of the lawyer for the Texas Medical Board said. So that's the word of caution. So now what are we going to do? So this is established rule, and it takes years for rules changes. And actually, the Texas Medical Board was trying to do something very, very good. What they were trying to do is prevent the unauthorized delegation of medical procedures, like the tattoo makeup and all these folks that do laser ablation of skin and beauty stuff and all this medical practice that should be done under a doctor's care in a doctor's office was being done by these strip mall places, clinics. And they were also trying to solidify delegation of practice for PAs, nurse practitioners, and such. So they had good intent. The problem is that it kind of screwed the EMS folks a little bit. So it actually helped us because it firmly says delegation of practice for medicine to the EMS is the physician's prerogative. So in that regard, it firmed it up. But the problem is we went from a very explicit, here are the things the medical director does, to these global bullet points. Then the board wanted to do that to make it more flexible for other physicians, but actually kind of may have screwed the EMS physicians. So what are we going to do? We're going to fight with the Texas Medical Board. I don't think so. That's not going to happen. We are working with the Texas Medical Association. The esteemed David Pearce and Kevin Schultz already have a resolution passed at the Harris County Medical Association, and it's going to go county by county by county to try and relook at these rules. TCEP, our ACEP version in Texas, is going to look at it. Texas NEMSP, we talked about it a little bit, and we're going to have to ramp up. The problem is the Texas NEMSP, we have no power, right? More importantly, we have no money, right? So anything you want to change requires money, influence, and power, and that's not what we have. So that's why we're working with the TMA a little bit. And then maybe there's a legislation change, and then we're going to try and do an end round. So instead of trying to change the Texas Medical Board stuff for delegated practice, maybe we can get some rule changes in the EMS provider section that mandates those things as a medical director. Or we can just sit in a corner and cry about it, one of the three, right? So that's what happened. And so the caution is you need to have someone looking at your ledge. What's going on in the areas that practice? Look at your state register of rule changes and be aware of what's going on. And I'm surprised there's not an AI product that we can buy that does this, but there isn't one actually, which is shocking. Maybe there's somebody's million right there. Develop a Texas or a legislation AI that scans for certain keywords. So that's my story. We'll see what happens. Questions?
Crying about it always helps, David.
I was crying. And did you know I channeled you earlier, Chris Cole, you weren't on?
Well,
Sorry.
yeah, that's right. It's all your fault, Chris. Okay, so I just want you to know that. Now, let's go ahead. We got to go back. I got to see who is on the panelist list that's got the hand raised. It's Kevin Mackey. Go ahead, Kevin.
Hey, David. Thanks, Paul. Hey, David, have you met Chris with NEMSP, the new guy that's our state advocacy guy?
Yes.
Okay.
We met last week, and I'm gonna try and get a hold of him to try and channel it. So just for Kevin's, I'm gonna expand. The NMSB has 4 states that are in the radar. It's Texas, Florida, Colorado, and California, I think it is. And they're watching advocacy wise what's going on, and we missed this. Just
Okay,
straight up, we missed it.
Yeah. And then what's his name, Kevin?
Paul, his name is Chris, and we are working on expanding to
Okay,
include
just-
more states.
Does Chris have a last name?
I will get it for you and
Oh,
send
okay,
it to the
got
group.
Okay, good.
Don't
All
need
right,
a
good.
last name. Chris is enough.
Yeah. Yeah, you're like Madonna or yeah, right. So
Exactly.
or Beyonce, that's right, Chris. Or anybody named Chris could just use Chris. But in any event, just for those who may not know who are visitors to our call, Kevin Mackey is the president-elect, will be the next president in a couple of years of NAEMSP. We're glad to have him on the call. And he's hailing in from Sacramento, where I'll be in a couple of weeks, right? Or 2 or 3 weeks, I think. That's all. So I'll see you then, Kevin. And when you have a restaurant, you have to take me to, right? So that's on the plan.
Echo and Rig, we're going to be there.
I'll tell you, it's interesting. I wrote the original medical director rules or whatever, what I say, descriptions back in like probably 1982 or something like that. And interestingly enough, I did it with a fantastic fire chief because we were concerned mostly about making sure that the fire chiefs didn't have that much power, or the medical directors, if they were really terrible, had some kind of control. But we wanted to, and it was just great working with him. And it was, let's say, very thoughtful. It took a lot of time, and we've been living with him like that, David, right, for many and many a year, right? And
Exactly, and actually helped us with our budgets and our
Yes.
scope. And actually, those bullets are in our contract. Those exact bullets are in our contract with the city, and that's something to keep in mind. So when you do have a contract with your authority having jurisdiction, make sure your role as a medical director is explicitly outlined, not generalities, explicitly. We
Yeah.
will do X, Y, Z. And then, interestingly enough, we had an audit in our office about this contract a couple of years ago. And they kept saying, well, you say you do this, show me.
Yeah.
And so we actually had to develop a documentation tool where every phone call we take, we log. We had to develop all kinds of processes just to satisfy the audit. And actually, it's worked out pretty well.
Yeah, and it's just that they had the rule came in about EMS medical directors first came in, believe it or not, in '83. We published this stuff in '84, and so it was on for 40 years without anybody needing a change. So that's wow, just all right. Deep breath. Okay. So all right. Anybody else? Hey, David, if you can sign off on that on the share, I appreciate that. Anybody else have any comments or things to say? And I'm going to say more generically, Kevin, for your purposes and everyone else on the call, is I'm feeling a little bit more and more as I go different cities right now. There are medical directors who are under attack and or not getting along well, and they're trying to limit their authority. And that's kind of worrisome. I just see a trend that's happening out in different places around the country. I'm not bringing the names up right now for reasons, for obviously, the political reasons and all that, but it is a trend. We could have quieter talks about that offline sometime. So, all right. Who else? Anybody else have their hand up? Any other comments then? All right. Hey, Peter, do you see Ian on? Because Ian was going to come on last week, and then he couldn't, we were getting too close to the end, so he said he'd defer till now, but we could do it next week as well. I just want to make sure I didn't leave him up. It's probably a good time for us to go around the room anyways, and also touch bases with our ID people as well in that meantime, but I didn't see him. There is a name on the attendee list that says it's identified. See, if I don't know what these people are, I don't know, I leave them there. Like there's a dot there. One of them just has a dot. The other person that I saw there was a National EMS Quality Alliance. Can you tell me or chat me or whatever to say who you are, National EMS Quality Alliance? And I think then, if not, then maybe we could just go around the room and talk to various people. Let's start though with Eileen. Anything we should know about cholera-wise, Eileen?
Cholera-wise, that's what you want to know about? There's so many respiratory diseases going around. What would you like to know about?
Fine, you can talk about anything you want, okay? I don't care, I was just thinking that was the latest thing that percolated out at WHO.
Yeah.
About stuff. But we can talk about what's
I mean,
more.
cholera is a fascinating disease because it's a non-invasive bacterium that does all its damage through its toxins, and used to be incredibly deadly until we started doing oral rehydration when possible, and when not possible, doing IV rehydration. It just completely changed the risk of death from cholera, assuming you have access to clean water, and that's where the rub is in many of these settings, is the lack of access to clean water.
Got it. Oh, that makes total sense. I remember, by the way, that's an interesting, funny story. About 5 years ago, I was on tour with you too, and we're getting ready to go into Mumbai, and they'd heard that there was malaria in India or whatever, and so everybody was wondering if they should take Valrenone. And so I had 200 people I'd have to order it for and get it to them. But it turns out that they said that the water was so bad in Mumbai itself that the mosquitoes couldn't live. Right. So it was a kind of an irony of things, right? And that thing. So whatever.
Talking about, respiratory stuff, I think one of the interesting things people want to know about, it's a lot been on the news about the largest ever outbreak of active TB that's happening right now in Kansas.
Yes.
That is, I want to point out, it's happening in those areas of Kansas City that are more impoverished. And there's another interesting aspect to this outbreak in that we've done some studies, and it seems that having had COVID-19 with significant symptoms decreases, for reasons not yet clear, CD4 helper cells that normally target Mycobacterium tuberculosis, making a higher percentage of people susceptible to manifesting disease when infected at lower doses of the Mycobacterium TB bacterium. So that may be contributing to it, as well as I said, TB is very much a poverty disease. Socioeconomic factors play a huge role, and COVID has played a role in decreasing our economic potency in many areas and hampered the health, responses for those reasons. And David has his hand up, so I'm going to stop talking.
Go ahead, David. David Miramontes, it's okay. You have your hand up. You may not know that, but you do. Okay. Well, that solved that issue, right? So that's funny. David Miramontes, do you have your hand up?
I did not. I was trying to unshare, and it's right next to it. So carry on, Eileen. Sorry for the interruption.
Yeah.
No worries.
Eileen, was any of the the first thing that comes to mind is there bacterial? Antimicrobial anti-TB drugs were being used. Or was there a resistance developing? That's always been a classic thing.
It's been documented that between half and a third of the patients have had multi-drug resistant TB. So that is part of the complication. Yeah. The other thing we have to keep watching is this H5N1, and the fact that they recently found, remember how we talked about that the specific H5, because there's many different H5s, right? The specific H5 has shown a high propensity to recombine with different norminidases. Well, they just found an H5N9 outbreak, and it's the exact same H5.
Okay.
But I continue to be more worried about the form that we've seen so far in humans and in cows because of the additional mutations that exist that make it easy to have pathogenicity in mammals, and that's part of the entire picture. And in terms of COVID-19, I continue to see more cases of influenza A with COVID-19. There seems to be a fair amount of people that are getting a dual infection right now. And it really is important. By the way, you can go to CVS and other drugstores and get one of those tests that tests for influenza A, B, and COVID at the same time. So if you have a respiratory thing going on, go ahead and take that test, because if it's influenza A, by the way, I obviously have a respiratory thing going on, with all the grand, but I tested negative for everything. If I had tested positive for influenza, I'd put myself on Tamiflu right away and read the whole consequence of that. So just, bear in mind, taking, when you do a test that has offers you a solution, it's really worth doing the test.
Okay, and then like what you said last week was that if you already got your flu shot in the fall, you don't have to get another one this time, but maybe we'd be thinking about COVID shot again. Okay, is that correct?
Absolutely. If you're elderly, which you know, you and I are, we need a second dose of.
Definition of elderly is anybody 15 years older than you, right? So that'd be fair. That's
Yeah.
funny. Okay, good. All right, well, thanks a lot. Anybody have any questions or Chris, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, first of all, I was going to start with define elderly, but you kind of did that there.
Yeah.
Eileen,
Yeah.
a couple things. So we had a patient admitted here at San Francisco General with the H5N1, not the N9. And at least the information that I have as of yesterday was that while obviously a lot of surveillance going on now, that we still don't have human to human transmission on that. Is that correct?
That is correct. It still has not made that leap of being able to attach easily to the alpha 2/6 receptors that we have in our upper airways. And that's why we're not having easy human to human transmission yet. But it's really only one more mutation needed for that.
It's really helpful information to give to our staff because obviously the staff, nursing, physicians, everybody who encountered that patient was quite concerned, and it was very nice to be able to tell them. It was put their minds somewhat at ease that we still don't have documented human to human transmission. So that is helpful. And I would just add that from San Francisco's standpoint, we have a lot of influenza A. We have a fair amount of norovirus. We're seeing very, very little COVID. There's a little bit of the co-infection, as you mentioned, but really for every one of COVID, we're seeing somewhere between 5 and 10 influenza A's, and there's a fair amount of norovirus sprinkled in there as well.
Absolutely. That's very similar to what we're seeing here as well. So that's everything you said is right. One more thing I would like to comment, and that is, even though it's not easily transmitted from person to person, hygiene is still super key because you sure don't want to be touching body fluids and then contaminating your mucous membranes and potentially getting it in deeper.
Hey, Eileen, is INH still the primary drug?
For tuberculosis.
Yes, yeah. I'm just switching. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I'm switching back. I should have said that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But we never give it by itself anymore. You know, and the
Yes.
combination of drugs depends on a number of factors, including whether there's multi-drug resistance, age,
Yes.
exposure, yada yada.
Are people just the reason why I was bringing it up is, are you seeing people? Are we still seeing people that have pyridoxine deficiencies, or is that part of the plan usually when you treat someone?
Well, no, that's an incredibly important point. We always want to give them vitamin B because you don't want to have complications from using the INH. Absolutely. So yeah, that's still an issue.
That's the reason why I brought it up. It was just a teaser again, just to make sure people are aware that we're starting to see this again out there. Okay.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to go
Thank
wash
you
my
very much.
hands since I've been coughing into them.
Yeah. How's the job doing? Okay.
The job is fantastic, but I have some personal issues that I have to work out. So things have gotten a little complicated for me. I'll tell you offline.
Okay, good. All righty. Well, thanks. I'm sorry that you're having personal issues. Okay.
No, it's not. It's good, but it complicates everything.
Sure.
It's not a bad thing. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on. I want to do a couple reports. Let's first go overseas a little bit, just because of the timing issues. Thomas, anything you could tell us going down in the UK or in your world of critical care? Sorry to catch you off guard if you're still there.
That's okay. My phone was on the table.
Sure.
There is nothing particularly concerning here. We are hopefully seeing a little dip in the flu numbers. So we have de-escalated our critical incident in the hospital. So hopefully we are going back to just normal business.
All right, got it. I'm sorry, it looks like I missed Pierre from France, but yeah, he'll be back on next week. He's always so good about being on. And thanks a lot. And we're very flattered that you're on with us. This is great. And then you and I need to follow up on this stuff I sent to you. I don't know if there's any actions I have to take or not. You let me know.
Yeah, I will.
Okay, good. Earl, let's move on to Mick Malloy then over in Dublin. Anything, I assume you're in Dublin, or are you in Wexford today? Where are you, Mick?
Dublin today.
Okay.
So
Yes.
the storm last weekend, interesting outcome. In the end, 760,000 customers were without electricity, which represents 1/3 of the electric grid in the country. And we
Wow.
are still 76,000 customers with no electricity. And usually it's more in the remote areas. The amount of trees down was absolutely phenomenal across the country. And
So
the
disproportionate
generators were not for
business.
sale anywhere. They were sold out of generators and extra diesel, and the country's surviving on generators right now.
And so disproportionately is probably much larger, 50, 60, 70, who knows, percentage of the people out in the hinterlands, okay, were
Correct.
affected, correct? Okay.
Yeah. So one of my very elderly cousins died during that period. It was a natural death, but the
Wow.
funeral is in one of these small little remote towns, and we were trying to find accommodation for the family. Every hotel in the area has no electricity, so we found a place that's 3 miles as the crow flies from that village, but because the roads had been washed out, it's a 90-mile journey around in a circle to get back to that little place. 3 miles. You could, if you had a helicopter, you'd be there.
Yeah. So I gotta tell you, thanks to Mick, when I have done visits there for various things, and I have to evaluate conditions across the country. One of the things I learned was that actually Ireland is it's the Republic of Ireland is a about 32,000 square miles, if I remember, and the state of Maine is 35,000 square miles, and yet because of the roadways, et cetera, things are not as easy to get around, et cetera. And there's about 5 million people in terms of registered, say, taxpayer residents, right? How many people live there altogether? Do you have an estimate of that?
So in Republic of Ireland, it's 5.5 million. In the actual geographical Ireland, including Northern Ireland, it's just over 7.2 or 7.3 million.
But that's the resident population. But do you have more people?
No, well, I mean, from time to time, obviously in a big holiday period, a lot of people will come back from the UK. So Irish people, maybe 500,000 will come back over those particular holiday periods.
Yeah. So
not
it's
that many leaving, a lot coming
like
in.
New York City might have a registered nighttime tax-paying residents of 8 million. But at any given time, there might be, because people commuting in and so on, might be up to 15 million, that kind of thing, and so on. And then there's 4 million people in the meantime that were out of town because they're business people or actors or whatever it may be, right? So it's just interesting to see. So, but whereas I'm saying there's more stability there as well. Yeah.
So in Irish, the word for road is bohar.
That's right.
You have a trackway that's wide enough for a cow to go this way and a cow to be standing sideways. So the word was driven off of cow tracks in the old days.
Yeah.
A bohareen, and this is where all these little country places are, it's just enough width for 2 cows to pass side by side. And all these little bohareens would be surrounded by huge trees. So you're going down these small little trackways in your ambulance, you meet a tree, and the EMS guys all have, what do you call them, chainsaws. So they cut this tree up and get past, and then about 50 feet down the road, there's another big tree down. They have to cut that tree. They can spend hours getting to a place during these types of storms, cutting up trees along the way.
But even on a day-to-day basis, well, I should say, particularly in the summer, you do have a larger thing. It's called tour buses, right?
So there's a particular roadway down in Kerry, which is only one way for buses, because if 2 buses meet, there isn't enough space for them to pass on the road, and one of them has to reverse. So to try and avoid this, and it's quite hill and can be a 1,000-foot drop. So to avoid this, they make the buses only travel one way, but then the bus meets a small car, and the car similarly has to reverse for a couple of miles to get to a place that's a little bit wider so the bus can pass. It's a challenge. I try and avoid those roads.
All right, good. Well, great to see you. Thanks for being on, and then hopefully you'll be part of our team on in June. Okay, we'll see, and then we'll be in contact about that. Block that week out for me. All right, let's go around the room real quick. Don't have much time left. One thing I do have to say, seeing Chris Caldwell there, is that I saw my first case of TB, right? And there were many of them. Guess where I saw it? At the General with Phil Hopewell's service, right? That was, is Phil still there, by the way?
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
good.
Still holding court and doing rounds.
I mean, he's older than me, and that's pretty old. So yeah, you tell him I said hello. Okay, that's great. And then you know, he's great friends with Len Hudson, whom you know as well. So which is great. All right, so let's move on. Let's see, Doug, let's go ahead and see if there's anything to report out of NMSP or anything else you want to report to from the state of Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, I should say.
No, the only thing that since there was some conversation about it earlier, I put into the chat Chris's name from NEMSP, and he works with advocacy with our state chapters. I just wanted to point out that the 5 chapters that were mentioned as targets or you know, focuses are not the only ones he works with. He'll work with any that are having a advocacy issue, but those 5 just happen to have some recent activity that has them as a focus.
Yeah, so it's not exclusively them. That's just the way he started so far. So okay, got it. That's
right. It's
helpful.
Chris Kruger. Kruger is his name. So anybody that is NEMSP members and working with your particularly state chapters, that's sort of his role, is to have some focus on state chapter issues.
Is he a C Kruger at NAMSP.org? What's his email? Do you know?
Oh, now you're asking me. Actually, so it's probably a Kellen email, because you know, he's Kellen's staff who is assigned to NAMSP for that role, but he does advocacy things for Kellen.
Right. Well, if you can find it, send it to us. But the point is, though, that was part of what I also wanted to ask, was he a Central Time Zone largely?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, and the best way would be that people that are going to be contacting him, you need to do it through your NAMSP state chapter. So
okay,
I would work through the chapter to contact him rather than have individuals contact.
And then let's you and I talk offline. I want to tell you, there are 2 or 3 people that reached out to me. They're under fire, so to speak, and but I didn't want to bring it up here. So
Okay, sure.
so that you're aware of that kind of thing, right?
Yep, sounds good.
And there's maybe some sensitivity about all that as well, for obvious reasons, right? Okie doke. Let's see. So let's start moving around. I was going to go to New York right away, but this is great. Glenn is on faithfully every week, but he got called for grand jury duty. And it's like he says, this is a whole different deal than jury duty. He just wants you to know. I can read his emails, but I won't. We don't have much time left. But anyway, so he apologizes for not being here, and he's still waiting for the judge to come in, all that. And by the way, if you could put it in the chat, if you can, whoever National EMS Quality Alliance was, I'd like to know who it was. Okay, so if you can let me know, or or email me or something. Okay, because I don't put people on if I'm not sure who it is. All right, so then let's just go. Chris, I guess since you were there, anything you report out of San Francisco?
Now we talked about it. We've been hit pretty hard with the viral bug here, and there's lots of, as you can imagine, immigration angst related to our sanctuary city status and the various rules that apply to that. So far, we have not been invaded by ICE, but there is a lot of concern about that, and a lot of preparation. You know, we're dealing with, and everybody will understand. We had a really tough case yesterday of a woman who was pregnant and shot in the abdomen, and the implications of that and the impact that has. You know, I as much as I know this, it's a forever reminder that it's one thing when you're managing it in the acute setting. It's another thing is how you adjust, recover, absorb that type of a call, both for pre-hospital and emergency folks. So that clearly is an impact that we're seeing today. That happened yesterday.
Sorry about that.
But overall, we're holding steady with the normal boarding problems and viral illness that is affecting both our patients and our staff.
Okay. Let me call you in half an hour. Sorry about that. It was my wife. She always knows when to call me, when I'm busy. So, all right. Thanks, Chris. And then the other thing I was going to ask you was, or something I was going to ask you. Gonna drive me crazy now. All right, don't even worry about it. I'll talk to you later about it. Oh, I know. Who is the EMS? Are you the fellowship director there for EMS?
Eric Silverman is the EMS Fellowship Director.
Okay. I'm just let them know I'm going to be on the decal meeting, I think in March, like I think that March 20th, yeah, and I'll be down in Los Angeles with Clayton and Mark, so on. All right. So let's move on. Let's see now, Angus, let's see. Well, Angus, anything out of state of Florida, since you're the state medical director and you got Tampa Bay?
No, nothing significant this week. Thanks, Paul.
All right, good. And then later, I want you to come in and report about the educational center, if you don't mind, to the group. If that would be kind of a fun thing to do, if you don't mind. See if you prepare something to be like a 5-minute ditty and, you know, tell us how it is. That would be kind of a fun thing to do, if you don't mind. I think it'd be great as well. Okay.
Sure. We're still,
even though it's Florida specific, it still is kind of a cool concept and maybe would stimulate other things as well elsewhere. All right, Ben, anything in Milwaukee?
Not too much going on. We just expanded our blood program to our busiest department, so hoping to get some more cases there, but otherwise not too much.
Clayton, anything in LA County?
Yeah, there's a little bit of concern following the fires that we may get coccidioides because all the dirt that's been stirred up.
Oh,
so we're keeping an eye out for that.
And so it's not just in the valley, it's down there as well, right? So
yeah, it's much less down here, but with the amount of dirt that's been turned, we are concerned about it. And we usually get about a case every 2 or 3 years amongst our firefighters.
Yeah.
Usually the wildland folks or the folks up in the high desert, but this one may impact quite a few more. So we have eyes on it. And then the other thing I would say, and this, I don't know how this will relate to the crash in DC, but we're seeing some disaster profiteering going on. People telling.
Lost you, Clayton, just so you know. Lost your voice. Clayton, we lost you.
Oh, sorry.
Maybe someone cut you off because you were talking about this. So go ahead.
We're seeing some. We're seeing some agencies posting on social media things like nebulized glutathione and chelation therapies for cancer prevention for firefighters from these for-profit companies.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah, just beware of that.
Yeah. Okay, got it. Yeah. Either way, that's just a good thing to think about all the time, etc. I just got something today that was great. That was from one of us, by the way. I won't say who it was, saying that here's where you said checks to or something. What?
Yes.
It's just bizarre. I don't know. They must have got our website and they're throwing names around and all that kind of thing, right? All righty. So let's see now. Well, let's go on. Mark, are you there still? Mark Cohen?
Yep.
Since you're in play. Anything to add here?
No, just to add to what Clayton was saying about the profiteers. We've had, again, snake oil salesmen come out begging us to basically help them, help our personnel. So Clayton's helped us stand up a little work group, try to come up with best practices as advised by toxicology, and more importantly, just come up with some unified messaging, just to make sure that our members realize that us not doing something is in their best interest. For the most part, we're demobilizing today from the major fires. Weather's changed. We've had a little bit of rain, so we're going to get back to business as usual. For the most part, it hasn't affected EMS operations, much more obviously of a suppression event. But we had a lot of use cases for our advanced practitioner units, essentially helping out with some of the evac centers initially, and mostly just backfilling some of the stations whose resources were deployed to the field, and they just didn't have as many vehicles and personnel to get to the EMS calls. So we had some success with that, but not much else for the paramedic side.
Okay, good. And then Peter D'Souza is running the decal meeting in March, and he's in contact. So thanks for setting all that up. We got a good plan. It sounds great. So I'm looking forward to it. And you and I'll work out details in a little while. Okay. Yep. So let's go to Philadelphia because we lost you last week. You're working in the emergency department. Was I right? Last week, Crawford?
Yeah, something like that. I can remember.
Yeah.
We just finished what turned out to be basically a month-long cold emergency response operation. It was a citywide operation, but the fire department was heavily involved. And one of our new missions in life seems to be gathering up unhoused people and taking them to warming centers and other shelter and other resources and stuff like that. And we didn't use ambulances. We had other city vehicles we used. And over the course of the past 3 weeks or so, we transported over 1,000 people.
Wow.
And I think we did such a good job that I anticipate this is going to become a precedent for future cold snaps.
So you're gonna have to budget for that, right? So
I
that's
guess. But the good news is our overdoses went down.
okay. Okay, that's good. And so you don't have any new drug that they're mixing with us that report back to us yet. That's great.
Yeah, I think they have to get back on the streets and be using again.
Yeah.
No.
They added ice to it, real ice. All right. All right, well, Crawford, great to see you as usual. Thank you so much, sir. And then let's go down and Doug, David, I want to skip you for now. And Doug, we talked to, and Kevin, anything out of Sacramento?
Paul, the only problem I'm having is we are on the precipice of launching our blood program and we're having trouble with the contracting part from UC Davis. And I'm looking for someone who may have an example contract between a large hospital and to provide blood to an agency, to a fire department. So if anyone has an example contract of that, that would be very, very helpful.
Randy, do you have something? Randy Schaefer?
I'll send you mine, Kevin.
Oh, sorry about it, Eric. Yeah, go ahead. So
Eric, you are my hero, man. You're always rescuing me. I appreciate that. I reached out to Randy Schaefer and I haven't heard from her yet.
Yeah,
Okay.
she was on the call. She had to jump off, but yeah,
Okay.
between the two of us, we'll get you something.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you.
Perfect. Thanks, Eric. Okay, thanks for jumping in there. All right, good. And then Kevin, we'll have our plan in action here pretty soon. I'll let you know what's going on. Let me jump up to Portland since I was supposed to be hanging on with the West Coast there, and I left out John Jew. And John, go ahead.
Basically, the bottom line, we're seeing the same themes as Chris's. Seeing a lot of flu, and personally, I was in ED. Wednesday, I saw 2 or 3 concomitant flu and COVID as well. So number one, we document that that phenomenon. The second one is that we're actually watching the H5N1 closely, and I agree with everything that Eileen says. I think it's something to be a little bit worried about in that setting. And the third one is that the watching closely, Congo has got an outbreak of monkeypox, the B1, and Uganda. I think Sudan has I think Marburg or no, Sudan has Ebola.
Ebola,
as well.
yeah.
So Sudan has Ebola, but that's basically the end of our report. We have a Providence hospital strike, and we're getting basically a lot of the, I would say, internally diverted to other hospitals. So our hospitals are having trouble with the volume. By the way, Providence, for people that don't know, has 1/3 of the market volume in the entire Portland area.
Wow.
So it's big. Yeah.
Okay.
That's it on my report.
Hey, if you don't mind, if you would, John, maybe in the next week or two, can you just give me a kind of a quick presentation about wildfires? You're Bill, the medical director. Tell them what you're the medical director for. I'm sorry to send it.
Yeah, I'm one of the Mashura Curry, as you know, Paul, if you met her, she's basically done a yeoman's job in a very good way, uniting the entire U.S. Forest Service medical operation. This doesn't include the BLM, but regarding your specific answer, I am historically I've been 30 years a medical director for the Incident Medical Specialists, and Forest Service has their region. The medical director for U.S. Region 6 IMS program, not the entire Forest Service right now. So basically, Michelle has a group called Lima Loco Incident Medical. Lima's advisors or whatever it is, the acronym. Basically, there's about 10 of us in the Pacific Northwest, and and the other big deal is that there is a national protocol that's on the web, and it's actually very useful and it's very well done. Okay, so it basically outlines the entire scope of, and it's basically an enabling protocol. It's very well done. I applaud Michelle in that.
Okay, well, you heard me mention her before because I've now made contact with her, and she and I were gonna talk about a week ago. Then she got involved with all the inauguration stuff and blah blah blah.
Yeah,
and busy. So I basically I should have followed up with her. So I'm gonna maybe get the two of you together and do a dog and pony act for us, okay, on that.
Yeah, that'd be great. By the way, we had a informal meeting at NUSP with all the medical directors here as well.
Hey, have you heard of this issue about the Coxie being drug? Have you
Yeah,
heard?
I mean, it's LA has historically got Coxie with all the wildland fires. In Las Vegas and Phoenix, that's the daily activity rather than the
Well,
issue.
do they have histo then Midwest? I mean, it's just interesting.
Histo obviously is endemic. So Coxie is endemic in that area, and with all the wildland fires, and if it gets dry, you're in trouble from a Coxie point of view.
Got it. Okay, let me jump over to Peter. Anything that you could report either from your jurisdictions and or state of Florida as the president of the chapter? Are you still the president of the chapter, or are they electing new people yet?
Yeah, I'm trying to elect new people. We're gonna get that process started ASAP.
Okay, got it. Anything new from your end then?
Yeah, no, we started enrolling, not enrolling, but we started providing whole liquid plasma to TBI patients in Palm Beach. And we just had another patient yesterday who received it, and we're excited about what that looks like. We're also looking at our antibiotics for sepsis data. I just had the students finish the review. We have almost 1,300 patients in the last year who received antibiotics, and the average time from 911 call to antibiotic administration was 26 minutes, and then the time that they received it prior to hospital arrival was 11 minutes. So if you do the math on that, EMS is able to give antibiotics significantly earlier, and I would say 45 minutes to an hour earlier.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself allows us, according to CMS, to it obviates the need for blood cultures. So we're hoping to show.
Peter, if you don't mind, because we're obviously over time now, would you mind doing a presentation on this maybe in the next week or two? And it's important that people know that you said antibiotics plural is an important part of that word there, and then it'd be good for them to know what you're using for entry criteria. That'll be an important thing to know for folks who want to know about this. Okay, so how's that?
You bet. Yeah. It's ready to go. Just let me know.
All right, so I'm trying to see if there's anybody else from the medical directors that I've missed here. So Roger, you want to tell us anything? I got to really shut it down though, if you don't mind, unless there's something really urgent.
No, nothing big, but on Tuesday, we're going to have Eric Yeager rejoin us locally. We did a podcast with him about death in custody, which is still a hot topic. We actually have him in person on what's called Challenges in the Streets at 1 p.m. on February 4th. It's actually, if you Google Montgomery County Fire Rescue Challenges in the Streets, it's actually a live YouTube video that I don't think is restricted, but we're going to be tackling that. But I'll leave it at that because we're running short of time, and looking forward to seeing you guys next week.
Don't put him in a prone position is the first advice I have. So, all right. So listen, let's move ahead, and I'm going to shut down then for the week. And then thank you very much, everybody. See you in February. So February, what is that? The 7th, I think. Yes. And we'll see you on the 7th. And hopefully, in the meantime, welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. Thank you all for being here. Very interesting day today, well, as usual, but it was particularly interesting for a lot of reasons. So thank you so much for being here. I learned a lot. Hope you did as well.